Wouldn't it be great if someone would analyse the full ACCA SBL pre-seed information for the December 2024 examination Rodnim Events Company? Well, if you are doing that exam, you are in the right place. My name is James, welcome to my channel, and in this video I'm going to take you through my full exclusive SBL notes that if you click the link in the description of this video, you can access a copy all for yourself. It's taken me hours to go through it, and I hope it gets you those extra marks to get you the 50+ pass ahead of your SBL examination. I'd also recommend that you take advantage of some of the mock papers and other pre-seen analysis packs from Astranti. And for pure transparency, as ever on the channel, if you were to click any of the links in the description of this video, I'd be entitled to a small percentage if you were to purchase any of the materials, which is always a massive thank you for all of your support for the channel. It makes making these videos so worth it that I get messages from you guys. Oh, James, I got 48, 49 last time, and now I'm well in the 50+. So let's get started and head through today's notes on there. And if I was in your shoes, this is what I'd do. First of all, on the contents page on the left-hand side, you've got to come up with a mechanism of breaking down these notes. There's a lot of pages on here. Again, if you've downloaded my notes, they'll definitely help you out to save some time. But you can see there, break it down per the contents page. So introduction, Harland's events, management industry, overview. And then when you go through the notes yourself, actually pick up on, well, what did I think about that section? What was particularly important? And make sure as you're going through my notes on the screen, everything underlined is a key point, key term, key figure, or element that could link to a set requirement in the SBL examination. I've also put on the left-hand side in the introduction and content some areas that are imperative for you to be aware of, to have in the back of your mind, that the SBL exam can cover a variety of topic areas, but the likes of agency theory, stakeholders will definitely be on your exam, either them being internal or external. Agency theory, I think, could link into the actual setup of this business. We'll come on to in terms of Rodnim, where they're currently in a partnership, but could potentially incorporate to an LTD or a PLC, and therefore having shareholders and agents, or should I say principals and agents. And that is where agency theory could be linked into some of your arguments. CSR, again, could be tested because we've seen environmental and sustainability factors mentioned in the case study notes, and we'll come on to those later on. I've also included the professional skills marks areas. They mention it in the external examiner's reports for SBL. Students tend to do the worst on skepticism, definitely, and commercial acumen. So skepticism, questioning the requirement, posing an insight as to how is that the case? What is that issue? That is what the marker is definitely going to be looking for. And commercial acumen is applying your knowledge of SBL back to the scenario, which in this case is the events management business. Do that by applying Rodnim's actual name itself, where they operate in Harland, and that's where the notes, as you can see on here, every place or person is highlighted, making it easy to find. Analysis, communication, evaluation tends to be done reasonably well because you're balancing an argument for and against, pros and cons, sort of SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses on there. Last but by no means least, do not overlook the ACCA Code of Ethics, integrity, objectivity, professional behaviour, professional competence and due care, and confidentiality. Ethics will be on your examination. There isn't too much as you're going through the actual pre-seen notes. There are little hints on there. However, I think it could be an area that comes up in the requirement that you are going to have to be proactive on. And if it does come up, apply it to the scenario and utilise those codes of ethics, being very specific and linking it back to the event that it's referring to. Now, coming on to the introduction paragraph, what was important on here? Well, of course, we've got Rodnim on there, their events management business based in the country of Harland. That is critical as to we don't want to be referring to them as it or they, or not getting perspective, because for your notes to get down, we have Harland on there is where Rodnim operates, and then we're also given later on in the notes the global figures as well, so make sure you don't get mixed up on that. Rodnim, well established 6 years ago on there. Again, opportunity for growth. They're really an emerging company, but also face challenges of competition. And to get around that, they've got to specialise and have a competitive advantage managing events, and they specialise in corporate and private clients. The private clients tend to be a bit smaller, and the key thing for your notes you'll see later on in the recording is that they do not currently target or have any business to do with the public sector. So again, an opportunity for a SWOT analysis there. They're in the growth phase of the business life cycle and have 2 founders. Again, we'll come on to in the partnership, but for this part of the pre-seed notes, it is critical you get down that they are a partnership rather than a limited company or a PLC. There is risk attached to that, but the reason why they've done it is so they could maintain control of the overall business. However, that could link into a variety of different issues and areas. Number one, fundamentally being that in a partnership, you have what is known as unlimited liability. Therefore, the owners, also known as the partners, there are 2, if they were to rack up debts or have a fine or a potential lawsuit, they are liable for those debts from their personal finances. It also gives opportunity for the market to test you on the likes of capital structure on there, maybe liquidity issues and decision-making processes. But that is the introduction. Who'd have thought you could get quite so much out of basically 2 to 3 sentences? Now coming on to the Harland events management industry itself, and you've got to understand and apply this back to the local market conditions, economic stability, cultural preferences. These can all link into a pestle model analysis, for example, on there. And the brand is key to compete against the larger competitors. The competitors we'll come on to later on, but just for your notes now, Rodnim is not one of the large competitors. They are a small competitor, and therefore you'll see in the underlying notes, there are certain aspects that the clients are looking for when they're deciding which business to pick in order to actually provide the events they're looking for. So in terms of the overview, as you can see on there, normally for a planned or specific purpose, again, you can read this through. I'm just going to highlight the key aspects on here. Larger events include corporate conferences and the music festivals, whereas smaller events on the other side actually are weddings and maybe private individuals. So a variety of different stakeholder groups is the key thing for you to get down and refer back to. How are they going to manage it? In other words, the larger the event, the greater the commission, but the more hassle it is to actually organise. Then we get on to the expectations of an events management business and the clients they deal with. And an events management business is responsible for ensuring that all aspects of the event run smoothly and that the event meets the objectives of the client. This links into what is known as the NPS score on page 11. In other words, would the clients recommend us? Are they satisfied? And sadly, in Rodnim's case, this has been going down year on year for the past 3 years. Then we come on to the actual fee structure itself on here. Events management businesses charge a fee to clients for managing events, and any revenue generated from the event itself is kept by the client. Therefore, we have different models on here. We have a fixed fee model, making cost management a massive key to success, rather than saying, did it perform very well? In other words, if you're given a fixed fee, then you've just got to keep it under that fee from a cost perspective to make it actually viable. We're then going to come on to the different types of events, starting with a larger event now. And key bit for your notes here, a larger event, you're asked by the client to tender. And that means basically saying, okay, if you're tendering for an event, you're going to tell us what you can do for us. What is your cost? What is your plan for doing it? And the key 3 elements that I've noted down here is for that event at the tender stage, they have to, in this case, Rodnim or whoever's pitching for the clients, is all about managing the services and the fee they would charge. Those are the 3 key elements of the tender. And when it comes to the actual awarding of the business management tenders, the tender is most acceptable to the client is usually picked. So in other words, you've got to build a rapport and actually getting to know the client individually. And the key bit on page 11 of the notes is Rodnim only has a 45% tender success rate, which is pretty low on that. They want value for money, differentiated, and something that is going to provide value to the event they host. Now, for your notes, this is where we get onto global figures, and we're at the revenue part of the financial statements. That's sales, turnover. That in 2003, the events business, shall we say, or I was going to say the events industry globally, had a turnover, a revenue of $1,960 billion on there. with an estimated 11% annual growth for each of the next 5 years. In other words, that is fantastic. It's a growing industry, opportunity for Rodnim, but the flip side of that, that is where you get other competitors going, there's a lot of growth in this market. I think we could tap into it. In terms of the events management business now, what they charge, well, it's between 35% to 40% of event ticket sales in fees for managing events, making it financially lucrative and a very competitive industry. Corporate clients and smaller private clients, in other words, what Rodnim deals with, are normally charged a fixed fee negotiated in advance. Now, this is where you read into that and you go, we've got an events management business charges 35% to 40% for event ticket sales, which is a variable amount of fees. But I would interpret that as that is a corporate event for a corporate client. So the corporate clients, you can charge a fixed fee for them, plus you get a variable fee depending on how many turn up to the event. Whereas the smaller private events, they're just charged at a flat fixed fee, negotiated in advance, less flexible. And we've been told that there's a risk of some of them in the past have actually been loss-making on page 10 for you to have a look at. So it's hard to estimate those future ticket sales in terms of setting the fees and tendering. A revenue model of fixed fees and a percentage base is the most lucrative, and you'll see it later on. The corporate events are more profitable for Rodnim. Moving on to now the events management in Harland. Harland is a large, prosperous, economically advanced country. Again, you could fit that into your pestle analysis. Competitive events is very highly competitive in there from a management industry perspective. They operate locally and nationally and have some international reach. Again, opportunity-wise for a SWOT analysis. And the Harland events management market is dominated, key phrase here, by 4 major companies. We are not told who they are, but if you look on page 6, we are told that Rodnim is small and not one of them. These large companies take up around 74%. Again, we don't know what the breakdown is of that, if it's sort of, 15, 20% here and sort of equally split, but it's measured by fee income. And the remainder of the market share, which Rodnim falls into, is between many small events management companies. So consider this linking it to barriers to entry, the players in the market. And when we come on to the revenue generated by events in Harland in 2003, being $108 billion, this is where Porter's 5 forces is sort of hinted at here to determine the intensity of the competition in Harland, and you could pull into play one of the actual models. This is where from that $108 billion, with the events management business in Harland earning around $39 billion in fees from managing these events. As you can see just above me now, I'll scroll it up, we have a few figures based on the figures we've been actually given in the pre-seed materials, and I've taken the actual fees earned in Harland and divided it by the actual revenue, and that's where we've got 36.11%, which fits in between the charge that we've seen up at the top in terms of between 35 and 40%. So bang on in terms of what you'd be expecting from a variable perspective. But then we can look at Harland's revenue as a proportion to the global revenue. I've taken the 108 billion divided by the 1,960 billion, and that tells us that Harland actually is only 5.5% of the global revenue. Again, further opportunities for Rodnim and expansion. And then coming on to Rodnim now in terms of a proportion of Harland's actual fees and Harland's actual revenue, we've only got that Rodnim's fee income in terms of Harland itself is 2%, and in terms of the revenue is only 0.72. So that's looking at the 39 billion and the 108, and I'm sure you're telling me now, James, where's that 780 millions come from? That is the revenue that Rodnim has generated in 2003 on there. It's later on, I think, on page 10. The other areas just to consider are a potential merger or acquisition. We've got dominance of those established companies, opportunities like Rodnim to maybe differentiate and grow further. But the last thing that maybe you'd want to consider on here is that Boston Consulting matrix, where we have the Boston Consulting Group, shall I say, where we have low market share in terms of Rodnim and a high rate of growth. So that is the sort of question mark quadrant where you go, is doing all right. But if we got a higher market share, that question mark quadrant would turn into a star on there. And again, a fantastic opportunity and company for the business to operate in. Now we're moving on to the type of events and the different segments and opportunities. I'm not going to go through and tell you what a music concert is and a conference on there, but the key bits from the notes on the side are that we've got large events and small events, and the key bits underlined in red are all about where they're located, the size, duration, and also, more importantly, profitability and scalability and what's prosperous in Harland, which we can see there. The sports events and the virtual events are the ones that are growing in popularity and that are actually going to be have substantial increases in the sports events in Harland over the last 5 years. So again, from a opportunity perspective, that if we're asked to actually say, well, Rodnim, what should they be thinking about, maybe focusing on, sports and virtual should be on your list. Virtual, it does what it says on the tin, growing in popularity and lowering costs. You're not having to travel on there. Linking this to a strategic plan now, you could actually go into sort of market development. How could they expand? And one of the areas you could link it to, you can see from my calculations on the left, is we're given the percentages of the different events, virtual, private, music on there, and I've taken the fee income that the events companies in 2003 have achieved, which was 39 billion, and then multiplied it by the percentages. If you want to note those down, I definitely have those ready to be deployed actually on the exam day for SBL, and it just showcases to you which ones are the most prosperous, the conferences, music events on there, festivals, and those are the most highest generating fee income areas. But you've got to be saying to yourself, and this is the skepticism part of the professional skills, can Rodnim actually specialise in a particular area to gain a competitive advantage? And then we have those virtual events and the sporting events, only 5 and 12%, something you should directly refer to on there. If we come back up now to the actual corporate clients on the side here, and we must tailor our services to meet the specific needs of each client. That is really, really key, but we're going to go through the clients individually. And we've touched on previously in the introduction about what type of fees are charged. Well, with those corporate clients, we always charge a fixed fee, and if it's a music conference, a music festival or a conference on there, then there is that additional variable fee income of 35 to 40% of the ticket sales in order to cover the extra costs, because the more people we have in, then the more variable income they will actually achieve, because they're going to incur more costs like staffing on there. So the Harland events industry is dominated by corporate clients. These are focusing more on larger events, more sort of recurring business. Maintaining strong relationships is going to be absolutely key to build the rapport. In other words, the client will say, oh, Rodnim did that event for us last year. It went really well. We'll have them again back next year when we do it again. And this has been the situation for years and is not expected to change significantly in the future. And that's where we get those percentages in terms of the fee of the ticket sales. And later on in the preceding notes, we are told that the corporate clients, keep it for your notes now, are the most profitable and lucrative on that. Private clients, on the other hand, are fixed fees, not as recurring. When I read through these, I was there going, well, how many times can the same person get married was my sort of thing for it. But hey ho, it's just sort of one of those things that, you know, normally most people only get married once on there. I'm not, but I wouldn't be a very good private client for them. Public sector, though, is the interesting one for your notes on here, because, again, referring back to the introduction on page 2, it was a case of we're told that Rodnim do not actually cover any public sector clients. A massive opportunity there from a SWOT analysis point of view, and possible challenge running virtual events if they've not done so before. These are the other factors that we've just got to read between the lines as to interpreting the pre-seed materials and then balancing that with what we're told on the exam day. You'll see in my key notes on here, again, you can read the whole thing through, but I'm just going to focus on the important things. Recently, the Harland national government has actually engaged several events management companies to run a series of virtual conferences. But we're not actually given any indication if Rodnim was actually part of this on there, which in fact that's a bit of a silly comment because we're already told public sector clients, we don't actually have that for Rodnim. So you've got to be saying to yourself, well, why can't we get involved with that if we're part of the Rodnim team? Key point here in terms of client expectations, that all three types of clients, and this is where on the exam day, in the unseen information that we're not told about, if in Harland they have increasing expecting events management businesses to provide creative and innovative ideas, well managed, meet the specific requirements of the client, a professional level of service throughout the events management process is also expected. In other words, if on the day you get something that doesn't sound very innovative, not very creative, the staff are actually not doing their jobs properly, not being good to the client, refer to that direct quote on there and say that it's not meeting the client expectations. We've also got on here about utilising technology to provide this expected service level, and systems and risks are on page 9. So again, it's overlapping a variety of different areas in the pre-C materials. We then come on to the breakdown for 2003. And this is where, again, you can see it in my notes, 23% public sector in terms of revenue on there. It's hard to scale up the private clients, but we'll come on to some opportunities later that if we're stuck on private clients, why don't we just only focus on the premium private clients that have the higher margins? Again, something that you could actually add some value in your analysis. We've got to actually consider the level of service provided too, in terms of Rodnim employs temporary staff that we'll see on page number 7, sort of how bothered are they on these sort of things? You know, we're told that the client wants a really good service level, but if you're working with temporary staff who might work on one project 1 month and then not have work for another month or two, how bothered are they going to be? And then there we have as well, Rodnim and the management team need to prioritise where to allocate resources and focus on a niche and growth areas. In other words, the corporate clients, yes, they're very lucrative. Yes, it's the main sector at 73%, but it's a case of it's their dominant source of fee income, but all the big players are in there and all of the smaller players are as well. Well, that's where we come on to actual collaboration and cooperation now. Really interesting point for you to get down, that generic services are not recommended here. They must differentiate, they must provide some bespoke service. And the larger firms have actually got an advantage over a smaller firm like Rodnim. So the smaller firms have got to work out a way, and this is where larger event management businesses operate completely independently. However, the smaller businesses like Rodnim informally cooperate and collaborate with one another to strengthen their collective bargaining power and position in the market. In other words, if we band together and work together, we've got a better chance of competing against the bigger fish in the pond on there. That can work in a variety of different ways, such as you can see in the notes at the bottom here that they do this by saying, well, if one is holding a music concert and the other is sort of specialising in music concerts, they'll actually invite them to partner in, and this would be a sort of nice referral, and it would be reciprocated if another opportunity arose in the other way. And it works with the staff as well, where it's a case of if one of the smaller firms is really short of staff and one of the other shorter firms has got lots of staff, they will use them, one-to-one and back and forth on that. In other words, it's better for the smaller firms to work together rather than against one another, because then they can put pressure and actually be complementary and improve a more rather competitive business. So we've got strategic alliances, joint venture agreements on there, and this is where they have access to temporary staff and casual staff and better security as well. Different factors that can help them run the business more effectively. The only thing with this is, which is later on in the notes, is the two partners of Rodnim have actually said, we don't want to collaborate, we don't want to cooperate with smaller firms, we want to be independent. Again, that'll be a major opportunity that they could maybe look at those bonds and collaborations more in the future to find new revenue streams as well. So definitely worth noting that down. We'll come on to it later on in the recording. We then come on to the industry related risks now on the left hand side, and this straight away cries out for me pestle analysis. I've just highlighted on there the key titles, the key risks and possible harmful impacts. The key bits for you to get down are in the notes in red, where we've got economic factors, environmental factors, legal factors, and technology factors on there. And the key bits are underlined in red about inflation levels, interest rates, weather patterns, increased awareness of environmental impact of events. In other words, I'm looking at different stakeholder groups now and then going, who is going to be affected and how can it be linked into theories and models of the SBL syllabus? We also have regulation and legislation, health and safety, data security, IT again, protection, regulation, employee rights. That's where ethics can be thrown in there, along with cybersecurity attacks and unauthorized selling of event tickets. Again, a variety of different areas, but the key bit here is if pestle came up or if some stakeholder analysis came up, you've then got to apply the scenario and those possible harmful impacts on the right hand side to your answer. That is what the market is going to be wanting you to demonstrate on there. We're just coming on now to the technological innovations now, and there are several technological innovations which, remember, we've just looked at what the clients are looking for, and this is it, directly impacting the industry in Harland. And the key ones for you to note down are the actual live streaming of events, artificial intelligence, navigation and mapping of applications, and QR codes. But the artificial intelligence, and we've got some live streaming of events there, so this is where we've got the virtual events that come into it. We're not told how many of these events that Rodnim have actually done, but in terms of AI on here, to interrogate and analyse, to identify patterns and trends, and to gain a actual competitive advantage, not currently adopted by Rodnim at the moment. We then have navigation and mapping applications. This is apps, a bit like if you're on your phone. So what if this was to fail on the day of an event? It's all well saying that reducing the need for local signage and physical venue guides, but it's a case of, well, what if something went wrong? What if on your SBL exam day there was a major event and Rodnim's actual technology did not go to plan on there? And the last bit for your notes on there, which sort of links into no paper tickets, counterfeit risk on there, is that we actually have the method of controlling access to events and when included as part of the ticket. So what if someone actually got hold of the ticket, got hold of the QR code, or if the system went down and you've got thousands of people at an event, how would we actually go about that? What if something happened on the exam day and that was actually implemented on there and we had to face it as a business? What are we going to do with those risk factors for it? So now let's get on to the events management industry key performance indicators. Again, you can have a little look through this in your own time, going through all the words, but the key bits are underlined in red that we have financial and non-financial performance measures on there. The key financial KPIs, the fee income growth and the operating profit margin. If you go down to page 10, that is where you'll see the fee income growth has actually been going up. So again, positive on there, but the operating profit margin is actually going down. So for your notes, KPI 2, they're actually falling short on, and KPI 1, they are achieving. Non-financial KPIs are also interesting about the tender success rate. On page 11, we're going to come on to it later on in the recordings, we only have a 45% success rate. So again, that has to be improving to actually increase the number of clients that we are successful with. And then in terms of client satisfaction, it doesn't get any better there because again, on page 11, we've got a net promoter score, and that indicates the retention rate, referrals, feedback, satisfaction. And unfortunately for Rodnim, that has again been going down over the last 3 years. Lastly, we have an environmental sustainability KPI. And the key point here is that we've got waste management in there, water, energy. Elements of it we could be thrown at us on the exam day in the unseen information or in a requirement. And the key point for your notes here is that we don't actually have a manager or a partner who is in charge of the environmental or sustainability practices in their roles. Again, we're going to come on to that later on, but it's just something to note down. If it was to come up in any way, shape or form, those are the pros and cons in a nutshell. Fee income growth is the only one that's actually doing quite well. Operating margin going down, tender success rate pretty low, client satisfaction going down, and environmental sustainability, we've not really got any actual figures to go on, and we don't have anyone who is accountable, a manager or a partner on there. The The next element we're given is the industry body, and this is the Institute of Events Organisations, the IEO. Again, you could refer to them as the IEO in your answer. The marker will pick up on that. Just indicate up at the top of your answer that the Institute of Events and Organisations, in brackets IEO, and every time they see IEO in your answer, they will know who you're referring to. They support the actual industry itself, and this is where the keywords for you to get down in your notes are about the quality, health and safety and environmental practices of all of its members by setting common technical standards. We're not told what those common technical standards are, and we're also not told if Rodnim is a member. This again could be possibly included on the exam day, but what I'm getting at here is if you get anything involving quality, health and safety, environmental practices, refer back to the industry body, potentially to actually understand best practices, gaining more information on it. It's really important. They've only given us a little chunk, and I think there's room for them to provide more on the exam day. We then get on to Rodnim's actual events as an overview and a bit more of a background of the Rodnim Events Company. And when I say company, that is actually incorrect, James. Well done there for the recording. They are a partnership, which, as we saw in recording it up at the top in the first paragraph, a partnership has unlimited liability on there. That if the partners, Safi and Amanda, actually were to rack up loads of debts or could have a major fine, something on those lines, they would be liable to pay that, one from the business's money, and then if they ran out of that money, it would be their own personal finances on there. And the key first line, Rodnim Events is one of the smaller events management businesses based in Harland. Do not make the mistake in thinking that Rodnim, because they're actually having sales of about $780 million on there, again that's later on in page 11, that is still technically a small company, and they're not part of the 74% and one of the 4 larger companies on there. Rodnim specialises in managing events for corporate and private clients, so no public, as we touched on before, and operates in that partnership structure. We know that they've been established for 6 years, 2 friends in Amanda and Safi, so they trust each other, they've known each other for a long time because they've previously worked together at an events manager for one of Harland's largest events management companies on there. And they own the business equally 50-50. So they've got lots of experience they're deploying at the moment at Rodnim, and therefore the next final key sentence, we touched on it before about the cooperation and collaboration, that Rodnim does not have any formal or informal cooperation or collaboration arrangements in place with other businesses, as the partners wish to preserve Rodnim's independence. So that's where a key paragraph there, that they should be looking to band together with other small firms to take on the larger firms, and this is potentially, well, it is a missed opportunity there. If we come on to the organisational structure now, on the left-hand side, again, we've got Amanda and Safi, that partnership, 50-50, they're responsible for the strategic direction, but you could, again, link to hints here about potentially planning for an IPO. Remember, they're turning over 780 million, so that's a potential on there to ask the question about it. And then they could link into areas of the SBL syllabus like leadership structure, corporate governance, board structure, best practices, non-executive directors, executive directors. I think it's got a lot of rope on there to be testing a few different areas. We're then getting on to the ultimate or management responsibilities, where we have now, in terms of the strategic direction, Amanda oversees the entire events management program and Safi is in charge of the marketing and customer services. So you can see that in the structure, and we'll come on to it a bit later on. There are 34 full-time employees, so that's a reasonable amount of staff to lead and manage. And you can see that they all operate in a single office in Harland's capital city, so could link into location for some of those events we touched on earlier. And we have 3 managers. You can see that we have Mirza, Dika and Jimmy, and that is their organisational structure on there. The key split between the 2 partners up at the top, A and B, on there, Amanda and Safi, and leadership and delegation will be needed for those 34 full-time employees by the managers and the 2 partners on there. Then we're given more information as to, well, what kind of background do these managers actually have? We've got Mirza, very settled in, very experienced, over 20 years, already been at Rodnim for 3 years. And then you've got Dika, who, for context, head of event delivery, okay, remember £780 million dollar business on there, and is a recent graduate. So very inexperienced, but a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. Jimmy, on the other hand, a bit more that maybe you and I could relate to, is a qualified accountant and has been with Rodnim from the beginning. But then when we come on to how they've summarised some of the responsibilities and how it aligns to the management team, I went through it and went, imagine I was Jimmy on there. You know, you've got the usual financial control, bit of reporting, admin as you would expect, but he's also in charge of HR, IT, development. That is a lot of juggling of roles. And Dika as well, the recent graduate, very inexperienced. Events coordination, delivery, project management, risk management. That is a lot of stuff for a 22-year-old, along with Amanda, Safi and Mezes. But notice, as I touched on before, no one referred to actually environmental or sustainable practices on there. That links into that non-financial KPI. There are other social factors involved with this, from a potential pestle analysis question, where Rodnim employs temporary staff to support events and when they are needed. So we're not given anything in terms of, say, training or service quality on there. This could link into actual trade unions perhaps. And that's where, to give us a bit more of a picture, the SBL team now have given us how the operations are actually processed for tendering and the different 6 stages. The key bits for you to understand and have into your mind as to just a picture is the planning, the control and the delivery of the events to clients. This includes arranging for this nice little diagram on the right hand side, step by step, for temporary staff to work at the events in areas such as security, hospitality and technical support. So that tells me, I mean, we've got different risk areas, especially in the technical support. What if the apps went down? What if the IT systems went down? Are we now relying on potentially temporary staff to keep the upkeep of that significant system for the business? Then we've got the process and how it's been developed and refined, and Rodnim is able to deliver consistently high quality events to all clients. So if this is the case, then why has the Net Promoter Score been dropping on page 11? It's been going down for the last 2 years. So they're saying they're providing high quality events to all clients following this process, that we have an event invitation, we outline the planning, we then have a detailed planning, so scheduling the actual program, the logistics behind it. And we're not really told who sort of drafts this, goes through the initial documents, the tender for the actual success. We have the sort of business planning with Amanda involved on there, but it's a case of something is going wrong in terms of who is really accountable and are there different overlaps in terms of who's doing what. We then have the event organisation, so this is the QR codes that we're going to be talking about on page 9, and the opportunity for those joint ventures and partnerships to help each other out and to maybe streamline some processes. We can look for synergies on there, leading on to the event delivery, and then post-event conducting a post-completion review, evaluating success criteria. Again, that's that sort of feedback loop from the clients and different social factors that clearly hasn't been implemented correctly, because that NPS score has been dropping year on year. There is a reference to C Note 1 where you can see the process does not continue to this stage if the tender is not successful and the contract not awarded to Rodnim. So they get to the detailed planning, schedule the event, and I just said to myself, well, what about a feedback loop there as to why were they not successful? That is the point of when we get onto the 45% tender success rates, that is where they then progress from there and they complete the event. But something's been going wrong at that detailed planning, or even before the outlining of the plan. So the initial documentation, the budget, signing the contract, something isn't going right there. And last but by no means least, that note 2, we're not given the reference where it refers to, but it's an important note nevertheless, that for private events, key thing for you to get down, do not overlook it. I think mistakes we made here, thinking that private events need to tender. It says it directly there, for private events, the same process is followed, although there is no need to tender. You simply meet the clients, and then you work out if they are not engaged or not. Rodnim will not progress beyond the outline planning point again. So we are not told where note 2 actually refers to. I'm sure it's just a little point below, hey ho, but it's important on there because it highlights about not needing to tender for those private events, but we're not told which team member actually meets the clients, as the role isn't clearly allocated in the pre-scene information. So again, sort of links into the profitability side of it, who has decided on the process, the allocation of resources, and these are the different factors that you need to consider. That's even before we actually get onto, as you can see down below, the other factors that go on to the information systems and the risk category. Well, now let's move on to the IT failures, I think, that are going to potentially come up here, and the information systems that are broken down into those specific areas. So we're given the actual event planning system, the event ticketing systems, marketing systems, and management information systems. And what I got into this when I was reading it through was we've got an accountant in charge of the ICT areas and possible issues of lack of expertise, and some of the actual temporary staff may also be involved in the system management. So you're going to yourself, James Atros, for your notes, is the manager who is accountable. He's head of business support, and Rodnim utilises a range of information systems in the support of its business activities, including, as we said, the support and planning, organising all the events, project management tools. And the key bit here for your notes is that we've seen it previously before. Clients want to see systems and technology used to enhance the experience at the event. So it's really important they adopt some of these areas, but as you can see, AI is not one of them on there. So we've got areas about each event now broken down into separate activities. They want the actual events to be effectively scheduled, delivered on time, and within the agreed budget on there. So this is where, again, lots of all this is all assuming it all goes to plan. And the event ticketing system has no technological issues or potential innovations on there. They're using mobile apps where you can register and pay using a smartphone. I'm sure if you've been to a concert or an event, you'll have seen it before. Again, it's they're moving with the time, and I take from it that they're not stuck in their old ways on there. In terms of the marketing systems to effectively promote the events, it is managing, and it is integrated with Rodnim's website and a range of social media. Not given too much details. I guess this is an accounting exam, but it's something to maybe refer to that they could maybe allocate more resources to. Lastly, we're given more information about the management information system now and what it actually collates, and that is data into event planning, the progress, post-event reports on there, all to support the management's decision process. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how reliable is that? What kind of questions are they asking? And surely they'd have actually done something, because when we see the NPS score later on in the recording, the customer and client satisfaction has been going down year on year. So is there a correct mechanism and system in place collating that data and getting it to the relevant people? We then have that Rodnim uses an off-site data storage. Again, the alarm bell should be ringing here about remotely and securely accessing this data over the internet. So again, possible cyber attack risks there. Jimmy Atros is again accountable for this area, but would you say that a specialist of this kind of area for IT, should it be an accountant? We're not really told if he's really into his IT for it, or has he just been given the job? And Rodnim's website now comes into play about allowing attendees to book online, help with any queries, bookings, posting comments and experiences. The website also contains information about Rodnim and its business philosophy. So no ethics or values referred to directly so far. We're only given that in one of the strategic aims. The reason why I say that is ethics will be on your exam somewhere that you can integrate it. And we should just be looking for little hints and tips, which is one of them in the strategic aims we're coming on to now. You'll see from the extracts of Rodnim's website, the mission, and they've even put it in bold for us on there, is that they want clients to have a top quality service, ensuring the needs and expectations are met for the clients, fully met, should I say, that they will make every event a memorable experience for both clients and everyone attending at the event. That kind of says to me something's going to go wrong on there, and a key point not being implemented here, because the NPS score about that client satisfaction and the quality of service has actually been going down year on year. So they're not actually implementing their mission very effectively. We then have some of the strategic aims that I think overlaps with a sort of pestle theory model on there. We've got exploring and exploiting new business opportunities. Well, why we're not going into the public sector on there, or looking to collaborate, or international clients, or international expansion, shall I say. Innovation of technologies, operational efficiency. And it was interesting for the third one on there, and all about what Amanda and Sally are accountable here for, encouraging an open, respectful and ethical business culture. Could lead to ethical points or something on your exam day where someone is maybe not being ethical. Operating in an environmentally sustainable manner. Again, nobody in the team, managers or partners, are actually accountable for this role of sustainability, and that overlaps with our CSR strategy. A lot of points to get down there, and you could refer and directly quote those strategic aims on your exam day. We've then got to touch on Rodnim in terms of the actual risk register now, and we've given an extract for this, and we have some main categories of risk, but as you can see from my notes on there, I've gone such as. We've been given no details of this. Be prepared for the exam day. Well, main categories about which the business is facing. We've got the operational risk and economic risk I'm just going to come up to. But it almost kind of gives you a hint that there's more to come on there. That's what I was trying to get at with the point. The partners on there, Amanda and Sally, they're determined by the nature and extent of the business, the nature and extent of the risk, shall I say, when settling the risk appetite. So they're the ones who are accountable and in charge of the risk and adapt it when it is necessary. So what I'm getting at here is anything that links to risk on your exam day, Amanda and Safi on there, not Sally, Safi, should be who you refer to. This is where we've got control activities in place, overlapping accountability now, lack of role clarity, potential harmful effects on Rodnim. As you can see here, for each event, Rodnim also undertakes an individual risk assessment. This is where we've got the risks on the side here now, and it links into what I thought was interesting on here was who is accountable for those risks. So you've got Amanda and Safi on there for strategic risks, as we've talked about. The financial risks are all about sort of MERSA for the event planning. That's what the points were referring to. Economic risk, Jimmy's accountable for that, for managing the capital structure and liquidity factors. Compliance and regulatory risk as well. Operational risk, MERSA and DECA on there. But in terms of breaking down those risk categories into different factors, new competition there is a potential threat in our SWOT analysis. Attracting new clients attracting new entrants into the market is because it's already highly competitive, but it's getting even more lucrative. So it's going to put more and more pressure on the company. Costs associated, poor planning at the tender stage from Amanda has affected profitability in the past, and therefore it's resulted in loss-making events. Corporate clients are offered commercial credit terms, risk of bad debts, in other words, them not paying, and actually it becoming a write-off, and linking to working capital management issues. The economic performance in Harland directly affects the demand of corporate and private clients, another economic factor for Pestle, and we're given liquidity issues, regulation and legislation, political factors in there. And lastly, with operational risk, that is where a technology factor comes into it about resources, inability to procure on there, IT system failures. Again, there's lots to sort of debunk from that, but that is where you should be putting in points if a Pestle or SWOT analysis came up, linking back to those risk factors. Coming on to performance now, the final part of the pre-seed notes, we've got Rodnim has built its business around corporate and private events for clients. Each corporate event generates significantly more fee income and profit, which comes from the private client events. In other words, the corporate clients are the most profitable and an absolute massive strength for your SWOT analysis. A key sentence to note down in terms of a performance factor. And in terms of those performance factors from the corporate clients, it's led to increasing fee income over the years. So from 2001 to 2003, we've seen a 4.7% increase. However, over the same time period, the operating profit from 2001 to 2003 has dropped by 3.7% on there. In a nutshell, we're not effectively managing our operating expenses, and therefore you can see from the operating profit margins I've calculated at the bottom, it's decreased from 5.1 to 4.85 to 4.69 on that. It's showing us that the fee income's going up, but we could be more effective in our cost management. The other important areas on the last page about corporate tenders now are about the number of invitations that we actually get, the number of submissions that we actually put forward, and then the tender success rate. We'll go on to the actual words from the pre-seed materials first, that 86% of all tender invitations received during 2003 were actually completed. So you've got to say to yourself, well, apply that professional skepticism and say, well, why were the 14% tender invitations not completed? There's no mention of why this was the case in the pre-seed materials, so why not question it in your answers if it was asked in a requirement? We're then told from those that were actually submitted, only 45% of these were actually successful. So that's where you can see from my calculations up at the top, the calculations linked and referenced from points A and point B. There was a marginal improvement in tendering performance compared to 2002, so it's been even worse in the past. Tender success is recognised as a major driver of corporate business in Rodnim. In other words, we need to get better of this actual system going through that tendering process, and that is linking back to the partners of the business. I was also looking at this from how many invitations they actually had, so you can see the figures up the top, but then ideas and where they could improve. So they need to improve that tender success rate. They need to improve the service quality, those niche markets they could tackle, and packaging a better reputation and better brand that is going to attract more clients, and investing in higher growth segments. So referring back to virtual and sporting events is going to demonstrate your knowledge and application of the pre-seed materials. Other ideas of potential events now, again just thinking outside the box, you would get credit for this if it was applied in the correct requirement, if it was asked, but maybe sort of eco-friendly events, or not just focusing on just private events, but luxury private events with higher margins. Maybe even not-for-profit organisations haven't been mentioned in the pre-seed materials, but you could link that to some of your answers on there. We then come on to that NPS score I've been referring to, the Net Promoter Score. If you look at the figures from 2001 to 2002 and 2003, it's dropped from 9.1 to 8.4 to 7.5, dropping 1.6 points in the last 3 years. And this is all about a measure of client loyalty, satisfaction, feedback. In other words, how likely are they to recommend Rodnim events on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is the best score possible. So the NPS score is useful for benchmarking client satisfaction, as it provides insights on how Rodnim is perceived and can be indicative of likely future business. And I know that you're probably thinking, 7.5 out of 10, James, that's not too bad. But that's 3 in 4 clients are satisfied. That's 1 in 4 are not. Whereas previously in 2001, it was only 1 in 10, basically. 9 in 10 were very happy. It could also link into a balanced scorecard model here, linking into other areas of stakeholders, the finance aspects, customers, internal factors, and growth and learning moving forward. How can we get better? And last but by no means least, I've put for you at the bottom a nice little summary of some of the models and theories that I've referred to in today's recording, and that is where we've got pestle analysis, Porter's 5 forces, SWOT analysis, a nice little breakdown for you there. Again, if you've downloaded these notes, you can take them all in, but it's just to give you a few more bits of flavour about, you can see on here, government interest, higher market competition, temporary staff, a variety of different factors that when I was going through these, I would be bearing those in mind. If pestle, if Porter's, or if SWOT came up, those would be my key areas to actually refer to and to go into a bit more detail on there. And that takes us through our final part of the pre-seed materials. I hope you found the video helpful, going through top to bottom on there. If you have enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, and if you'd like access to my exclusive SBL notes, which are going to save you so much time, click the link into the description, along with checking out those Astranti mock papers and pre-seed analysis packs. They are definitely going to help. The last thing I can say is, best of luck for your SBL exam. Let me know in the comments how you get on, and click a link for a video up above me on the channel. It could definitely help you to get that 50+. So I'll see you on the other side for another video now. So thank you very much.